I still remember that dinner. My own son looked me in the eyes and treated me worse than a stray dog. After a few bites, I smiled and asked, "Daniel, could I have a little more rice?" Daniel shoved his chair back so hard it crashed onto the floor and said, "You always want more," he snapped. "Do you think this house exists just to feed you?" Before I could say another word, he ripped the plate from my hands and hurled it across the kitchen. Rice exploded across the tiles, the plate shattered. Then he looked down at me with a smile I'll never forget and said, "The dogs are welcome here, you aren't. Let me take you back to where this all started so you understand how we got to that floor. My name is Elias and I am 67. I spent my whole life working for my son Daniel. I mixed cement and carried bricks under a hot sun just to buy him a new pair of shoes for school. I built our house in Millbrook with my own 2 hands, wall by wall. I skipped meals so he never had to skip one. I took out quiet loans so he could go to a better school, and I never told my wife Grace how deep the debt ran. I remember his graduation day most of all, how I wore my one good coat, stitched at the collar but clean, and clapped louder than anyone in the crowd. I didn't care that no one clapped for me. Watching my son cross that stage felt like every hard year had finally paid off. Grace passed away not long after. Her photo still sits by my bed, and on hard nights I talk to it like she can still hear me. Daniel grew up, went to college, and landed a good job that paid more than I'd ever earned. But success didn't bring him closer to me. It pushed him further away. He grew impatient with me. He sighed when I asked how his day had gone. He snapped when I needed help with the TV remote. In front of neighbors, he'd order me around like hired help, then laugh it off as a joke if anyone raised an eyebrow. Slowly, he took control of the money, too. "You don't need much," he'd say whenever I asked for a few dollars for bread or tea. I noticed all of it, but I stayed quiet. I told myself he was tired or busy or just young. I kept making tea every morning. I kept waiting up on the porch every night. I believed patience was a kind of love, but patience wasn't fixing anything. It was only teaching my son that disrespect came with no cost at all. That night, the night he threw my plate and called me a dog in my own home, I knelt down afterward and picked up a handful of rice just to feel its warmth in my palm. Then I let it fall, stood, and walked to my room without a word. Something in me had gone quiet, not broken, but decided. I thought about all the years I'd gone hungry so Daniel could eat more. I thought about the loans, the shoes, the walls I'd raised with my own hands. I had given everything, and it had raised a man who believed comfort was simply owed to him. I decided I wouldn't shout, I wouldn't argue, I would just stop pretending the house belonged to anyone but me. The next morning, before Daniel woke, I pulled out my old folder of papers, every deed, every signature. The house had always been mine, fully and legally. My son only ever had power because I had allowed it. So I locked every cupboard. I locked the fridge, the pantry, even the front gate. I called an old friend, a lawyer named Mr. Ward, and had him start moving the house out of Daniel's reach. I called the bank and had his name removed from every shared account. By the time Daniel finally came looking for breakfast, every comfort he had taken for granted was already gone. He rattled the cupboard doors, shouting about his rights, about whose house this really was. He tried calling for food delivery, but I'd already cut the Wi-Fi. He tried the front gate, locked too. There was nowhere to go, and nothing to eat that I hadn't placed there on purpose. In the middle of the clean floor, I set down a small metal bowl, the kind you'd give a dog. Inside it was a plain scoop of rice. I watched him freeze. For a moment, I think he believed it was some kind of mistake or a joke. Then he looked at my face and understood it was neither. "Eat," I said quietly. "The dogs are welcome here. You aren't." He went pale. He knew those words. They were his own, handed back to him. He didn't eat that day, or the next. When hunger finally beat his pride, he knelt down and ate from the floor, alone in silence. I cooked a small meal for myself, ate slowly at the same table where I'd been humiliated, washed my own plate, and went to bed at peace for the first time in years. Word of what happened spread through Millbrook the way stories always do, through neighbors, through whispers, through the lawyer who filed the papers. People began looking at my son differently. His friends stopped visiting. An old neighbor who'd waved at him every morning for years started crossing the street instead. I didn't stay to watch it happen. Within the week, I packed one suitcase, some clothes, my papers and Grace's photograph, and moved to a small cottage near Alder Creek, a quiet village in the hills. I grew tomatoes and herbs. I drank my tea slowly. For the first time in years, my silence felt like peace instead of pain. Later, I gave the Millbrook house to a home for elderly people who'd been abandoned by their own families. I named it Grace House, after my late wife. At its opening, someone from the home read a letter I'd written, meant for everyone, not just for Daniel. This home is for those who gave everything and were left with nothing. To every parent who feels invisible, silence is not weakness. It is strength, waiting for the right moment to speak. Daniel stood at the back of the crowd that day. I saw him, though he never once looked up. For a long while after that, Daniel wrote me letters. The first ones were full of excuses. Later, they grew quieter and more honest. I read every single one but answered none. Forgiveness, I've come to believe, isn't a door that opens after a single knock. Years passed. Daniel finally traveled to Alder Creek and found me sitting in my garden, older now, reading in the sun. He knelt down, unable to speak. I didn't say anything either. I simply placed a hand on his shoulder and nodded once. Not forgiveness exactly, but something close to it. Then I went back to my book. It was enough. After that day, Daniel came back every few months. He never asked to move in. He never asked for anything. He just sat nearby, grateful to be let into the same room. I've lived out these last years in my quiet cottage. Tending my garden, welcoming neighbors who come just to sit and listen. Anger burns fast and leaves ash, I tell them sometimes. Silence burns slow, but it leaves wisdom. Someday when I'm gone, the neighbors say they'll plant a tree where I like to sit, with a small stone underneath it. I've already told them what I wanted to say. He said, "Dogs are welcome here, not you." I taught him that pride eats faster than hunger, and silence feeds the soul. I don't know if my son will ever stand in front of that stone and understand all of it. But I know this, I gave him everything I had once, and when he took even that for granted, I gave him one last thing, a lesson he'll carry for the rest of his life. If all this happens with you, what would you do? Tell us in comments.